Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Barely Bookish podcast. Today, we're going to be finishing up the same chapter we've been working on of Kindred. I'm going to be joined by Candace once again. Next week, we will be moving on to the very next chapter. So, hopefully, you guys are enjoying it. Honestly, I can see that you all are enjoying it. We've been getting a lot more listens, which is very exciting for me. I'm happy about all the new listeners that are here. Thank you for listening and enjoying this podcast. If you haven't listened to the first couple episodes, make sure you listen to those first, just because this does go in chronological order, and I want to make sure everyone can avoid spoilers if they don't want any. So that way, listen to the first episode, then come back and, work your way through the episodes and enjoy Kindred, because I'm really enjoying chatting about it, and I'm really enjoying having Candace on, and I hope you guys are enjoying this as well. I'm saying a lot of enjoyment, okay? I think this book is really good, and I feel like not enough people know about it. So I'm hoping that these episodes are kind of raising awareness for this book, and I hope some of you guys started reading it yourselves, because this is really a worthwhile read to me, and I think if you give it a chance, you will really enjoy it. I said enjoy again. I need another word. Can't think of one fast enough. You will... It doesn't matter. Just read the book, love the book, be the book. I don't know. Without further ado, let's get into the episode and talk more about this chapter before we move on to the next one. Rufus does admit that his dad sold Alice's dad because he was tired of Alice's dad continuously trying to run away.
Mm-hmm.
Because, well, he thought he was going to run away, but really he was just like trying to see his wife once in a while.
Yeah.
And like Tom wanted Alice's dad to like leave his wife so that he could marry someone that Tom owned, so that they could have kids that Tom owned. And I was like,
Correct.
oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I can't imagine that about thinking of somebody's reproductive choices, like their life
Mm-hmm.
as something that you can control. Like you're like no more than you're breeding pigs.
The one thing I
Like
don't...
that's
Oh, sorry.
no, I'm just saying like that's atrocious. That's an atrocity.
Yeah. And I also don't understand, like, maybe it's just because I'm a little ignorant in this fact, but I don't understand how Alice's mom and Alice's dad could have gotten together. You know what I mean? Like, I don't understand how, like, they are able to speak or meet or know each other for long enough to get married.
So the marriage I don't think was like a legal one
Mm-hmm.
because back then you're somebody's property. You can't
Yeah.
get legally married to them anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you say that that's what you want. And um Alice's mother, Alice is only free because her mother is.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't know yet if Alice's mom was born free
Mm-hmm.
or if she is somebody who attained freedom, like who was given her freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Um so as far as how they could have met, I mean, she could have previously been a slave and then they met and only she was freed.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could have been something like, I mean, slaves didn't have autonomy. They had to obviously report to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
but there were slaves who would go into town, run errands. They're always with you. So if let's say the person that you are, that has enslaved you, the person that owns you is in like a store and you're outside and there's like a free woman walking by that's pretty and you say, hi, how are you? Each time you go into town and you see that person, you'll have a little bit of a conversation. And I think that's how people would kind of fall in love and make acquaintances and new arrangements with people that they otherwise wouldn't have met. You know what I mean? Like it's all kind of going on under the surface,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I think it's so important that there's this whole other element to this book of like the cookhouse and like what the slaves do internally versus how they act and what they do to occupy their time externally, right? Like, I think that that level of privacy and secrecy is something that was able to be cultivated
Mm-hmm.
in certain situations, but people paid dearly for it,
Mm-hmm.
as we saw, in the opener when we first see the opening of that chapter where Dana goes back in time, and she meets Alice and her mom and her dad, and she sees them, get attacked.
Yeah.
Um, like this is such a hard read for me, because it's like these are people, these are human beings,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so clear that they barely treat other white people like they're human beings, let alone their slaves.
Yeah.
Something I did notice though for Kevin and Dana is that when they talk about people, they call them servants.
Mm-hmm.
They don't call them slaves. Like they'll say slaves if they're around them, or if they're around the people themselves, they're around, Waylon and his family and things like that. But when they're speaking to each other, they call them servants.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that is an important distinction, because calling somebody a slave immediately like kind of subverts their personhood
Mm-hmm.
to object status, because a slave is something you own, it's not a being,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's no autonomy, there's no freedom, there's no free will. um so I mean, that's kind of ahead of its time. I know even now, like in modern textbooks and things like that, in modern conversations, a lot of people will say enslaved persons or enslaved people
Mm-hmm.
rather than saying slaves, because it gives that person at least the dignity of, you are somebody who is in this position against your will.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shocking to like, read what these people have to say to Sarah, what Nigel says, what Carrie, I mean, doesn't say, but shows what Sarah says. Like, you know they're people who accept that this is their life,
Mm-hmm.
they accept that this is their lot, but they're still doing the best that they can to make the best of a really just abominable situation.
I think that's one thing I really like too about Octavia Butler is the fact that like she is showing people who are in this predicament like and how they are truly trying to live their daily life instead of being like and they were all trying to revolt and like which is cool. I do like those kind of stories, but I
Hmm.
also like that she's not being like romanticizing the era at all. Like she's
Yeah.
like this is the ugly truth of it. People just, when this is your lot in life, you just kind of deal with it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was dangerous to do
Mhm.
anything else.
Yeah.
If any of these people fought back, they would just lose their lives.
Mhm.
I mean, Sarah doesn't even fight. Sarah does everything that they wanted to do. She complies, and they
Mhm.
still sell her children. I
Yeah.
mean, Rufus even has a connection with her kids. Like,
Mhm.
he even says, like, "Oh yeah, I was friends with Aunt Sarah's mom.
Mhm.
I mean, Aunt Sarah's son, rather." So he says, "Oh, I was friends with Aunt Sarah's son, and Daddy sold him anyway."
Mhm.
So like, even his own son isn't enough
Yeah.
for him to like treat these people like, individual human beings. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, even Rufus knows, like, hey, these are good people. They work for us, they're part of our family. And his dad is like, no, they're not.
Yeah.
So like, to me, it's just wild.
It
Like,
is
it's just
wild. It's
it's just
it's
wild.
it's so heavy that I honestly can't do our entire weekly reading in one sitting. I have to like break it up because I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
ouch.
And I feel like that is something that shouldn't be the case. Like, I think it should always be heavy. If I
Mhm.
watch Schindler's List, it's not like I'm having a picnic in the park or something.
Mhm.
Like, that's heavy.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Any movie that's about the subjugation of other people is
Mhm.
going to be heavy and bad and scary and difficult and exhausting to deal with. But I think that it's really a mistake. Like, right now, we're having this critical race theory battle in our country. I think it's really a mistake to believe that these stories are something that we are used to or that we understand. Like, me reading it the second time, well, third time now,
Mhm.
it wasn't as harsh
Mhm.
as it was the first time. The first time I was pretty much in tears like every couple of pages. I was just like anxiety, panic attacks, all that stuff, because it's a lot.
Mhm.
Um but I think that that's something that we should familiarize ourselves with so it doesn't happen again. Like, there's
Mhm.
already a lot of, laws for all kinds of people, all kinds of Americans
Mhm.
that are rolling back rights, you know what I mean, of all kinds, civil rights.
Yeah.
And I think that, as we're kind of grappling with this, this new era, essentially,
Mhm.
of, socio-political nonsense, that things like this are important to recognize. Like, this book is, like you said, it's very hard to read,
Mhm.
but it's worth the
Oh
read,
yeah.
because you're learning so much, you're getting so much of a perspective that, unfortunately doesn't exist anywhere else. And like, I'm someone who's pretty well educated about this stuff. Having done my own research, my mom,
Mhm.
always kind of made sure that I did all my own research on things like this, and this time period, I think, as I've said before. But,
Mhm.
it, even for me, if I'm going in with that much knowledge and it's still a hard read, what is
Mhm.
it like for someone who doesn't know any of this?
Yeah, and I
Like it feels like true science fiction, you know?
yeah, I mean, I obviously had a lot less knowledge than you do because I did European history and I didn't get to learn about anything in America.
That's what I'm saying. It
Yeah.
wasn't probably wasn't even offered to you, right?
Not really. Like
Yeah.
most of the stuff I know is because a teacher like gave us a crash course. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So my knowledge is subliminal. Is that right?
Yeah.
That is okay. I didn't feel like the right word. I wasn't sure. But yeah, so everything I know is things that like one I have you on Facebook. So you teach me a lot of things that I didn't get to know about. And then I also listen to a lot of different like creators that like tell me about the world because I
Mhm.
grew up in a smaller town which was like diverse but also like rose-colored glasses for sure.
Sure.
You know.
Well, I mean, it's hard to see things like that when you're in it.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like it's very difficult to look around you and recognize that there's a problem when you are in it and people aren't bothering you.
Mhm.
And for me, that was something that I experienced all the time. I also am from a very small town. It's suburban but almost rural in
Mhm.
nature. And I was the only black kid in my school until like 5th grade,
Mhm.
I think. 4th or 5th grade.
Mhm.
And even then it was like a boy. There were two black children that were
Mhm.
both boys that were a grade, either 2 grades below me or 1 grade below me. And people just like whenever a kid would have, any kind of temper tantrum or act out or whatever, they just go, "Oh, time out, you need time out." But when these kids would act out and these kids would, behave a certain way, they'd get sent to like the principal's office. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? There were always harsher punishments for these black kids than there ever were for the white kids who would do even worse than that. So
Mhm.
I remember learning at a very young age, speaking up isn't always it's always the right thing to do,
Mhm.
but you're not always going to get the result that you want. And that's essentially like what we're seeing this main character doing here is like, she knows the right thing to do. It's easy to do it's easy to know the right thing to do.
Mhm.
Actually doing the right thing is very different. Like she doesn't want to just lay down and take it. That's not who she is. That's not the time period she's from.
Mhm.
That's not her perspective. But she also knows that if she doesn't navigate this appropriately, people can get hurt and there are real world consequences to those choices.
Mhm.
And I think that, that like can't be, overstated enough, that like she is so present and so aware of her choices and the options that she has or doesn't have. And then she's stuck there with her man who doesn't get any of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like Kevin gives me very like I understand the world if I'm a 5th grader
Hmm.
vibes. And then like Dana's like okay, but like there's a lot more happening.
Yeah.
And he's like, no. I okay, so I saw something interesting on TikTok the other day. People talking about like you go from so woke to once again being closed-minded. Like have you seen those kinds of videos?
No, but I kind of get it.
Yeah.
Like you become so woke that you're too woke about everything and everything is nefarious, and so therefore you're closed minded because nothing can be right because everything is wrong.
I'll give you an example so that we're on the same page. It
Hmm.
was she duetted this video of okay. She duetted this video of a woman talking about how she like doesn't trust basically shaming bisexual people
Hmm.
for ever wanting to be with a man because like down with all men and stuff. So it's like she was
Sure.
saying that she's a feminist because this and it's like you've gone so far
Yeah.
that now like
You're just as bad as the people that
yeah,
you say you hate.
yeah.
Yeah.
So like there was like that kind of conversation. My For you page is a lot of that because I'm aggressive. So
Yeah. So I have a lot of feelings about people that are like that. When I
Mhm.
studied feminist theory in college as well, there were a lot of theorists, feminist theorists,
Mhm.
especially radical feminist theorists who believe that. You also have TERFs out there, right? Trans exclusionary
Mhm.
radical feminists who don't believe that trans women are women. So those people to me are also in that same camp of
Oh yeah.
swinging so far, you know what I mean, to the left that you're just like on the right now.
Mhm.
And I don't. It's hard because I feel like if you are somebody who deals with discrimination,
Mm-hmm.
it can be difficult because there is a very fine line between self-preservation
Mm-hmm.
and being accepting,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. For example, I was on a call the other day and I said, "Oh, it's spooky season," because it's, spooky season.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Spooky
October
season.
when we're recording this. So I said that, and someone in the chat was like, "Those spooks better watch out." And I was like, "Okay." So if I were a white person, I would have just gone, "I know, ghosts, haha," right?
Mm-hmm.
And I would have moved on. But because I'm looking at this from the lens of an African American woman, right, of a very proud Black woman,
Mm-hmm.
um, I was like, spook is an old school word for Black person. It's like up there with the N bomb. And there are a lot of people who don't know that. It's like really old school racism.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of really old school racist terms
Mm-hmm.
that people use in like common company, like in, you know what I mean? Like in normal everyday conversations that people don't realize are horrifically racist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like saying gyps. That's very anti-Romani, right? And offensive.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of like slang words that people use
Mm-hmm.
that they don't realize come from negative origins. So I'm sitting here on this call going, okay, well, do I react to this person saying this?
Yeah.
Or do I just say nothing? Because I don't want to be the person, like if that person's just going, yeah, I know Halloween, ghosts, yay. And then I'm like, race card.
Yeah.
They're going to be like, hey, what's up? That's not what I meant. Why would you say that? And then the person is like really offended. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's like a huge dust up. And then I have to explain why I feel that way. And they're just hurt. They're not going to hear, hey, I feel that way because
Mm-hmm.
I've had bad experiences in the past. They're not going to hear that from you.
Yeah.
The average person won't anyway. They're just going to feel really hurt and embarrassed that you called them out in front of everybody like they were being racist when they weren't. And I've also been in situations where I didn't say anything
Mm-hmm.
and someone continued to use that terminology until finally I told someone else about it and they said something because I didn't feel empowered because it was somebody that was, they were a teacher. They were above me and they
Mm-hmm.
knew what these kids were saying and didn't correct them because they thought if they had corrected them that they would have just said the term more and then it would have really hurt me. So they just assumed that I didn't know that this was a racist term that they were using and just kind of let it slide. Because they weren't using it correctly, apparently. Which, like, that's even more insidious.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Than calling it out and being wrong about the person's intention. So I totally understand that very fine line.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really hard because, to a hammer everything looks like a nail.
Mm-hmm.
That's not untrue, but at the same time, no great movement was ever reached by just the people who were affected
Mm-hmm.
doing the work. There were white abolitionists, there were white people in the civil rights movement, there were men in the feminist marches. You know what I mean? Like there are people all over the world that were fighting for against police brutality and for justice for George Floyd and
Mm-hmm.
Philando Castile and Sandra Bland and all of these people whose lives were taken, innocent people whose lives were taken. So like it's a weird time to be alive for us.
Yeah.
It's a weird time.
The reason I brought this conversation up was I felt like Kevin is going that direction where he's like
Absolutely.
so woke that he's gone right back around.
Yes.
So turns out Tom was there the whole time listening and knows she was reading to Rufus. And so he decides to respond by asking her a lot of personal questions.
Oh yeah.
And Tom tells Dana that actually asking her very invasive personal questions, he's like, I could buy you and you could teach Rufus. And he says that if she stays with Kevin, she'll regret it, which is honestly the only decent thing Tom has ever done in this entire book.
See, that's the thing though, right? So like I know why she would regret it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know why she would regret it because he's kind of a douchebag, but I feel like this like old-timey man doesn't understand this modern douchebaggery.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to Tom, Kevin is actually kind of a prize. So when he says that to her, I'm immediately like, what conversations are you having with Kevin that we don't know about yet?
Well, think about it. Kevin told him right before this conversation, Kevin had said that he told Tom that he was going to sell Dana without her knowing.
Right. Yes.
So,
but I'm saying, like, is there more to it than that? You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, I'm sure Tom is going, oh, he's going to sell you off anyway,
Mm-hmm.
right? But that's not, like, the equivalent of what he's saying to her. He's saying to her, like, you're going to regret it.
Yeah.
Like, regret is different than, oh, you're going to get sold anyway. Sorry, buddy.
Yeah.
Like, regret is, if you stay with him, that's going to be a fucking nightmare for you. And I'm like, what? because she was already, remember, he was like, oh, I'm trying to make myself sound as disgusting as I can, and apparently it's working, which is frightening.
Yeah. Oh, I would like to be a fly on the wall there. I just need to know.
Yes. And like how he's like creeping on her, like he hears the whole conversation, like when Rufus asks Dana, like, why doesn't my mom like you, like what's her problem, and Dana's like, I don't know, ask your mama. And he's like fucking lurking in the hallway hearing all of this, and I'm like, so what does he make of that? That she doesn't, that you know what I mean, with his wife, like he doesn't even address it.
Yeah, thank God that she didn't say anything though. Would have made her
True.
life a lot worse.
Yep.
So one of the slaves ends up, or one of the, now because you opened my eyes about saying enslaved, I'm gonna go with that instead. Actually, I feel like that's nicer. And
I mean, if we go back and forth, like it's
Mhm.
natural, like we're
Yeah.
reading a book about slavery. I think that we are present and aware that these are people, you know. But I agree, it is weird to say slave.
Yeah. I will say when I wrote it the first time, I was like, oh, I don't like that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
So one of the enslaved people talked back to Tom, and Tom decided to make an example of him.
Yep.
And very brutally so. Honestly, I don't know if that person survived.
Yeah.
So Margaret found out that Dana had been sleeping, like where Dana's been sleeping, and decided to confront her about it, and basically said that that cannot continue in her Christian household.
Right.
And I was like, oh.
In her Christian household where she's trying to seduce
Mm-hmm.
a man who is not her husband.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Is that not the epitome of modern Christianity, though?
Oh yeah. Do as I say, not as I do. Absolutely. I think that like the horror too of her witnessing this beating
Mm-hmm.
too. Like, I mean, you know that it's extreme because she's already witnessed extreme acts of violence against her person and someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that like she's watching this happen, like, you know, you can it almost feels like there's a change in her perception after that. She starts thinking really thoroughly about, like, she's like hyper aware of sleeping in Kevin's room even before Margaret says something.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like Dana, that really kind of cemented to her what time period she's in. Like, she knew already, but like that really hit the nail on the coffin.
Yeah, and I also think too, like, Dana's perception and her perspective is important because she notices that there are kids who look, she says they look more like Tom Whalen than Rufus does, that are black children that are enslaved. And when you realize that moment, like when you think about that, especially from Dana's perspective, you start getting this real understanding as to why the first thing she says is, you black whore. Like, she specifically is talking about the fact that she's sleeping with Kevin rather than, you know, like anything else, because she has a problem with her own husband doing that.
Yep. Yep. It's not good.
No, wild.
Especially because the slaves don't have an option.
Yeah. It can't possibly be consensual.
Yeah.
Ever. Even if they want it, it's not consensual because you own them.
Yeah. Because there's an innate power dynamic there.
Correct.
Also, we find out that Margaret is the 1800s version of a micromanager and yells at everyone for not cleaning, but also never cleans. Yep. Much like CEOs. I'm just kidding. No, I'm not. Anyways.
Yeah, and that's when we also find out that that she's the reason she wanted to buy new stuff. Sarah tells her, like, oh, she wanted more finery and more jewelry, and she's not some Christian lady who, like, you know, our previous, you know, the previous wife was a Christian woman who cared about charity and faith and hope and all that stuff and was very kind. But this woman, you know, the reason Sarah's sons were sold is so that she could have more stuff for her house that she doesn't even look at or use.
Yep.
Like, that's how ruthless these people are. Like, they don't even consider that this is a person in exchange for some tchotchkes.
I can't even fully like wrap my head around it, to be honest.
No.
Like, it, to me, it does not make sense
at all.
Yeah.
Like, you have someone who, like, I mean, I can barely be mean to like an animal. Like, my cats get whatever they want. Like, To my fault.
Yeah.
They get whatever they
If
want. I
Moon
can't.
destroyed my notebook, it would be my fault that I left it out. You know what I mean? Like,
Correct.
I
Correct.
can't imagine being actually angry with her for a single thing she does in her entire life.
Right. And that's an animal.
Mhm.
Like, I can't imagine that with a person,
Yeah.
like a human individual. Like, that's like, there's so much to unpack there about your own state of mind
Mhm.
and the backflips and acrobatics that you need to do as a human being to look at another human being and say, it's fine for me to have complete and utter control of you, mind and body.
Yeah.
And it's especially fun that you don't want to be here and that you have to be here. And I'm going to exploit that as much as I can for my own gains.
Yeah.
Like, that's some ice cold shit. And I mean, even when he beats that slave, Tom Whalen, like, Dana says, like, he looks like he's doing chores.
Mhm.
Like, he doesn't look like he's hurting somebody or even that he's angry. It's like a complete lack of understanding, awareness, or interest.
It feels very much like it's just something he thinks he has to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and like, so I have a lot of feelings about Hamilton as a musical. I think I've said that before. Um which I won't go into now. But one of the things that did strike me as a commonality, right, is that you have this portrayal of people who were all slave owners, who are saying that slavery is bad, right?
Mhm.
And that they don't want slavery. And when I read that, I was like, okay, well, what does this mean, right?
Mhm.
Like, what did that mean for people back then? So I did some research on Thomas Jefferson and Alexander Hamilton and like all the major players of that time period. And it took an additional 100 years to set anybody free. And originally they were saying, well, we don't want to set people free without skills.
Mhm.
We need to make sure that they know what they're doing. Okay, fine, right? Fair. But like, no one's teaching anybody any skills. Like back then, people felt like they had inherited slavery from the British, but then kept it up and continued to exploit
Mhm.
people for over 100 more years.
Wasn't it Thomas Jefferson too that most like black people in America can trace their lineage to?
Oh yeah, he had tons of kids with his slaves.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, the enslaved woman that people like to romanticize their relationship like she had any choice in the matter, but
Mhm.
clearly she didn't. Even if there are pictures of her or paintings of her where she has a smile, like, we can't trust that.
Yeah, no.
Sally Hemings. Sally Hemings, actually, and this is what I'm saying, this stuff runs so deep. Sally Hemings was actually Thomas Jefferson's wife's sister, her biological sister. Her father used to rape Sally Hemings's mother, who was also an enslaved woman. And so Sally Hemings, Thomas Jefferson's paramour, people like to say, but actually victim,
Mhm.
she was literally his wife's sister by his wife's father, who did the same thing to her mother. And she was gifted to him. Sally Hemings was gifted to Thomas Jefferson when he got married to his wife by his father. So basically Thomas Jefferson's wife's father,
Mhm.
right, gave Thomas Jefferson his daughter, like his daughter's hand in marriage, as well as a physical daughter that he then impregnated and had multiple children with, and then denied any kind of personhood to them. And something that also used to happen back then is that instead of allowing children of slave owners to just go free and just be free, not everybody did that.
Mhm.
What was actually customary was to have them work for their freedom.
Mhm.
So as though their very existence is a debt that they have to pay off when they didn't choose to be there in the first place, nor did their mother choose to have them. Like, the whole thing is just so crazy. And then even Sally Hemings' mother was a slave
Mhm.
that was also abused, and so was her mother. She was also, so three
Oh
generations
my god.
in that one family from Thomas Jefferson's wife's side, right? Three generations of enslaved women who were forced to have children with their masters, with people who own them. And then their children would get sold off, or they'd make their kids work until they were like 35, 40 years old, which is most of someone's life
Mhm.
back then, and then set them free. So now that you can't have children of your own, now that you're, relatively too old to kind of start over again,
Mhm.
now you're free with nothing on the street. No house, no clothes, no nothing. Your family is God knows where because someone sold them off long ago. You're alone. So like, that's what I'm saying when I talk about, like, perspective, right?
Mhm.
Like, I look at this country and I go, okay, well, that was 250 years ago
Mhm.
that this ended. So in 250 years we went from that to a black president. That's pretty impressive. But like, we have to keep doing that work. And
Mhm.
I think that, like, that's what this book essentially shows, is like, we're talking about a modern woman who's from 1976,
Mm-hmm.
who's seen the civil rights movement. She's seen, colored restrooms
Mm-hmm.
and whites only establishments. Like, she's gone through slavery, and I mean, like, a slavery of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she's gone through this whole journey of civil rights along with the other people of that time period, and now she's forced to revisit all of this and see where exactly how far we have and haven't come, because she's got a white man who's married to her that's also grappling with this in the worst way.
Yeah.
Like, that's crazy. Like, this book is so good.
So good.
It's so good.
The next thing we find out too is that apparently Tom comes over to Sarah and asked how Dana worked and if she's lazy, which is scary. I don't like how much interest he's putting into her.
Yeah, it's weird
Me.
and creepy. And like, he catches her one morning on her way out of Kevin's bedroom and kind of just like smiles at her, like he gets that, like he gets like what she's doing, which it's like, again, like, it's hard to kind of think your way around this, I'm sure, in the moment for her, but like, what signal is she sending? Because she's willingly sleeping with Kevin because that's her husband, but he doesn't understand that. He thinks that she's willingly sleeping with her master, and now he's like, I want to buy you. So there's other implications to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Sarah also tells Dana that she needs to tell Kevin to let her sleep in the attic before Margaret loses it. And like, Dana's like, why? Like, I don't understand. And Sarah's like, listen, you have him wrapped around your finger. Like, you need to tell him he has to do this. Otherwise, things are going to get really bad for you really quickly. Like, honestly, shout out to Sarah. Love her.
Yeah. Yeah. Always on watch. Like, always on watch. And she's like, yeah, you're young and pretty, and, you only have so much time. And then she realizes, like, wait, Sarah used to be young and pretty.
She says something to Sarah too about like how she's like, why didn't you, do this? And like, how offensive, first of all.
Super offensive.
Yeah.
And that's that, man, that one knocked all the wind out of my lungs. Like, all the air out of me, because she, again, like, when people talk today, right, about like white privilege and things like that, right, people get very prickly. Very prickly about, the concept of white privilege. But the reality is that white people aren't the only people who have privilege. Everybody has privilege. If you are educated, that's a privilege. If you have money of any kind, that's a privilege over poor people, right? If you have, like, for me, I have lighter skin than some other, BIPOC people. That's a privilege. When I'm in different spaces, people can't automatically assign me a race. They're a little curious, which sometimes is good and sometimes is awful, because then they want to ask me about it, and that's never fun. But there's a certain amount of agency that I have over other people, and that's my privilege, right? Any agency that you have over someone else is a privilege, whether it's something tangible or not. It could be mental health. I have depression and someone else doesn't, therefore they're privileged over me, or vice versa, right? So she's not checking her privilege when she says that to Sarah.
Yeah.
She's talking to her like she's talking to a relic of the past.
Yeah.
Like, she's talking to, like, a hologram in like a museum or something.
She's talking to her like they're in the 70s.
Questions. Yeah. Like, she's not talking to her like this was literally 10 years ago for her. And she's still probably not over it.
Yeah.
And she's done everything right, and they still sold her children. Like, this woman is dealing with so much suffering. And when Dana asks her that, it's out of genuine curiosity, but her curiosity gets the better of her emotional know-how. You know what I mean? If she had thought for even 5 seconds, she wouldn't have said that. She like blurts it out and is like, did you try? Is that what happened to you?
Yeah. And it's like,
and then she, like, Sarah's like, what the fuck?
Sarah's like, I've literally done everything for you, and you have the audacity to speak to me this way.
Yeah. Yeah, especially because, like, I would say it's pretty clear. I think Sarah does try. And I wouldn't be surprised if Tom took a shine to her and took a liking to her, and if she was forced. You know what I mean? And Margaret found out about that, and maybe that's why her sons were actually sold. You know what I mean? Like, we don't know.
Yeah.
There's so much else that's happening, and for this woman to just be like, I'm gonna be reckless for a second.
Yeah, like, don't
like
do
she
that.
can't afford it. She can't afford it. To me, that's the beginning of the end of Dana being a little sloppy.
Yeah.
She gets a little sloppy.
Well, it's like she's been there too long,
Yeah.
And it's like,
it starts to change her.
Yeah, which is understandable. Like, once you're put into a situation like that, how could it not leave a mark on your soul?
Absolutely.
So this is the point where her and Kevin are talking, and they see the little kids playing a game where they pretend to sell their friends, like the little like enslaved kids. I was like, oh no,
Mm-hmm.
like that's dark,
Yeah.
and like they don't know
Yeah.
because that's just their reality. But like that
Right.
was that moment to me, like really flipped the switch for me. I was like, oh, like this book already, I realized quickly it was not going to pull punches for me, but that
Yeah.
to me, it was right in the gut.
Yeah. Totally agree.
I have a hard time with like kid stuff. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's one thing when
Because they don't have choices. They
yeah.
don't have options. They're just kind of strung along for the ride.
Yeah, because it's like one thing when it's
Mm-hmm.
happening to adults, not in this book specifically, but like with adults, you're like in modern day, you're like you can get out of this. If you try really hard, you can probably get out of the situation. But like kids can't.
Yep.
Kids have no way to get out of the situation that they're in
Yeah.
because they're completely reliant on the adults around them, and that to me is true horror.
Agree. Absolutely
Yeah.
agree.
So Kevin and Dana are talking, and Kevin's like, "It's not that bad here."
I thought it was going to be worse.
Yeah, I was like, okay, yeah, Kevin, it's not that bad for you.
Like, doesn't, and this is what I'm saying, right? So in true Kevin fashion,
Mhm.
still doesn't ask his wife what's happening.
Mhm.
She sleeps in his room every night,
Mhm.
and she doesn't feel like she can tell him
Mhm.
about watching that man get beat almost to death,
Yeah.
if not to death.
Yeah.
Like that speaks volumes about the validity of their relationship as a couple to me.
Literally, if I was in her shoes, immediately as soon as I got back to the 70s, I would divorce that man. Like,
Yeah.
goodbye. Absolutely not.
Well, so that's part of what I really like too about what a slow burn this
Mhm.
is. Because we do have Dana saying in like chapter 2, hey, I don't want him to come back in time with me because I'm afraid of what it might do to him.
Mhm.
What if it changes our relationship? What if it changes him?
Mhm.
She doesn't really think about how it might change herself because I think she thinks, well, I know what's going to happen. I know
Mhm.
slavery. I've read about it. I've studied it, whatever. I have family members. I've done the history lesson, all that,
Mhm.
right? But she's looking at him and she's like, what if something changes with him?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like, then we start seeing it happen
Mhm.
in this moment. He still exists with this woman. They have ample opportunities to talk after hours. And he's going to go, oh, it's not that bad without even asking her, hey, how has it been for
Mhm.
you? Yikes.
Yep. Yep. And then Dana
Shameful.
is reading with Rufus, and Margaret's in the room and keeps like interrupting. So Rufus
Mm-hmm.
like snaps. And in that moment, Dana's like, I can see Tom a little bit. And that's
Yep.
terrifying.
Yep.
So then, after that, Dana starts trying to teach Nigel to read. And in that moment, she's teaching Nigel. She's got a book in her hand. Nigel's on the other side of the cookhouse. Tom walks in.
Yeah. So this is actually, I think I don't remember us talking about that, about that moment that comes right before this one where he catches her in the library
Mm-hmm.
reading the
Yeah.
books. Tom catches Dana reading in the library and is like, hey, you can read to my son, but you can't just read on your own time. You don't have your own time. Like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Don't disrespect me.
Yeah.
He tells her up front, this is disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that, again, reckless, I get why she did it. Probably would have done the same
Mm-hmm.
thing. Definitely would have been more careful. But she's like, it's all or nothing now, right? She's like, she feels comfortable because Kevin has kind of been a crutch for her
Mm-hmm.
so far. He's been a little bit of a shield,
Mm-hmm.
and she goes for it. And like in that moment, like, man, everything is going so well. Alice comes to her, shows her, hey, I want to learn how to read too.
Mm-hmm.
Will you let me? She takes the book from the library. He's already accused her of stealing.
Mm-hmm.
He said when she was in the library that first time, you're stealing books from me.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, no, I'm just reading them. And he's like, but of course, to a man who's uneducated who can barely read, of course that's stealing to
Mm-hmm.
him. What else would it be?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't see how this is, normal behavior
Yeah.
for a person. Of course he thinks that's stealing. So, man, the second that she looks up and sees Tom, I'm just like, okay, so it's over.
Yeah.
I don't know how this is just I don't know how this is a halfway point of this book when it's obviously over.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here we are.
I honestly don't think I mentioned it because I didn't write it down. I didn't think that this would come back up to bite me, to be honest.
I'm
So I
sure.
was like,
Because why would it?
yeah. I was like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
like he just told her to stop reading. Like, it's fine, whatever. I did not think that was like an important detail. You know, sometimes I
Yep.
don't write everything down. So I don't think I actually wrote that part down.
Totally get
And
it.
then, you know, comes back to bite us right in the butt.
Oh, yeah. Almost immediately, too.
Yeah.
You get like 3 pages later and you're like, no.
Yeah. The good thing is Tom only catches Dana. He did
Thank
not
God.
catch Nigel or Alice. Thank the
Yes.
Lord, because
Oh my God.
could you imagine?
No.
Yeah. So Tom starts beating her, but like as she's like going outside to, you know, knowingly get beaten by Tom, she makes eye contact with Nigel, mouths "Get Kevin." She goes out to basically her execution walk. He starts beating her, and as her vision's blurring, Kevin's running towards her and she passes out. So at the end of this, we don't even know. I have a theory and I'm going to present it to you.
Mm-hmm.
I think I think Kevin told Tom about this because Tom said he was going to try and get her scared back into the past, back into the future. I think my conspiracy theory, and I'm putting it out there, and I could be totally
All right.
wrong,
All right. Mm-hmm.
is that Kevin manufactured this situation. And if that proves to be correct, I hate Kevin because Nigel could have gotten killed. Alice could have gotten killed.
Yes.
For
Absolutely.
him to go back to the future where they have running water.
Yep.
Like, I'm very nervous that was the case here.
Yep. Same. I actually think that you have a pretty good conspiracy theory. I'm gonna go and take this. I'm gonna take this ride with you because I think that might be it. Because I agree. He did say I'm gonna scare you back to our time.
Yeah.
I think that like what also really gets me here is that conversation she has with Rufus before this happens, because he's already got, you know, his gears grinding when he comes out and sees her in the cookhouse. And I think and again, I agree that someone must have said something to him. Someone must have tipped him off, because all this time, none of those people have gone out to the cookhouse. Not a single Wayland family member has been to the cookhouse. It is a safe haven for literally every single person of color that works on that farm. So for him to just suddenly show up out of the blue, like obviously someone said something.
Oh yeah.
Obviously someone said something, right? And like moments before, like a couple of like 2 pages before, right? Rufus tells him, you know, he like Tom tells him, "Oh, you should be ashamed of yourself that this black person, you know, obviously he uses the N-word, but this black person can read better than you. That should embarrass you."
Yeah.
And Rufus looks at him and goes, "She can read better than you too."
Yeah. Rufus, ruthless. But like
So
also
we already know.
Yeah.
We already know like where his head is at when he walks through that door. Like we already know how he feels. And then like how he treats his mother too. Like that also kind of doesn't give me the most faith and confidence for Rufus, because when he's like really nasty to his mother to get her out of his hair, to get her to like leave the room so that he can hear Dana reading and he doesn't have to, you know, deal with her shit or whatever anymore. Dana's like, "Hey, you can't talk to your mom like that," right? Even though this woman is a racist, even though this woman is a slave owner, even though this woman really only is powered by, you know, subjugation of others, right? She still is like, "Hey, she's your mom.
Yeah.
You got to respect her." And this kid looks her right in her eye and is like, "Oh, well, she always comes back." "Oh, well, she was crying?" "Yeah, she was crying. She's always crying.
Yeah.
She's going to come back and bring me cake anyway."
Yeah.
So in that moment, like, there's been this whole, like, this is what I'm saying, this is a lot for Dana, like, all in, like, one day, man. Because, like, she's in this situation where she's like, okay, well, maybe Rufus is good. Maybe I can help him be better. We're making such great progress. Things are fine. Things are okay. And then there's a moment where he's cruel to his mother, of all people, and is like, she's still going to come back with cake, even if I'm nasty to her.
I am very interested to see what happens next chapter because I'm nervous.
Like, chilling.
Truly.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So obviously she, you know, Kevin's running and she flashes back. And like, my first question is, does he get to her in time?
I'm placing bets he didn't. That's my bet. I think he's going to be stuck there for a year or something, and he's going to try and put uh Rufus in danger to get Dana back there. That's what I'm
Man.
thinking is happening. I don't think he got back to her in time. That's my guess, but we will find out next week. So,
We will.
thank you
We
all for
will.
listening. Candace, where can people of the internet find you if you would like to be found?
Everybody, you can find me at Candace the Magnificent on Instagram, all one word, as well as YouTube. I do some content on my own time. Recently, I've been on an ice cream review kick, so please head over there and check me out. You can also find me at Valor Studios, Valore. I am one of their cast members of Deadlands, a tabletop role playing game vlog that airs on Twitch on Wednesday nights. And then the episodes are uploaded onto YouTube on Fridays. And you can also, hopefully soon, find me on Spotify. Dungeon Jedi Masters has a new show coming out called Scattered Choices, and I play Tula Batunde. So by the time we air this, it should be up.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Barely Bookish podcast and you want more content, please consider joining us over on Patreon. It helps support the show. You get some bonus episodes. Every single month you'll get an additional episode. Plus there's a backlog. And it's all donation based. So for just $3 a month, you help support the podcast. And, you get a lot of cool content. This week, or I guess last week, I'm editing early. So last Friday, Witcher came out. So we talked about the first 2 seasons of The Witcher over on Patreon, and I was joined by Megan, a longtime friend. And if you follow Rhapsodic Geeks on Twitch and you watch me play Dungeons and Dragons over there, you will recognize Megan from a lot of the games we play. Also, if you haven't, check me out on Twitch because I play fun games and you get to see my face. So that's always cool. Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you all enjoy this episode. Next week we will be moving on to the very next chapter, so please make sure you've read that if you're reading along. Yeah. I don't have a lot of fun announcements right now. I am doing Dungeons and Dragons every single week on the Rhapsodic Geeks channel over on Twitch. So if you want a lot of that, that's every Thursday. It starts at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then it usually goes until about 9 p.m. Eastern. And then I have a lot of different streams over on my channel, but you can find me at Barely Bookish on literally everything. That's the best way to find me. Or you can go to barelybookish.com/connect and see me that way. We do have the Barely Book Club, which now we're reading The Gilded Cage, which is the sequel to The Prison Healer. So we're going through that right now, and I'm enjoying it. It's been a lot of fun. So I'm pretty excited to see what everybody thinks. If you already read it and you want to chat about it, you can chat in there once the book's done. It's probably going to take about 4 weeks for us to finish it. And when this episode comes out, we'll probably be on week 2. So we'll be done pretty soon, and then probably when the 3rd book comes out, we'll read that in there as well. So, and if you want to help us pick our next book, we will probably be picking our next book in about a week from when this episode goes live. So you can always join in and then submit books you'd like to read. You can do that at barelybookish.com/connect, and then there should be a button that says book club. So join that. But that's kind of all I've got for you all this week. I hope you all are enjoying and you're having a good week. And I'll catch you guys next week. Our logo is designed by my little sibling Sarah. Our theme song is by Raphael Crux. And I'll catch you all later. Bye!